Hi there and welcome to the third community conversation. These are sponsored by Rocky Mountain Power and the Salt Lake Tribune, and we like to make them future focused. And this is a perfect opportunity. The point of the mountain is a 600-acre piece of property in the middle of the fastest growing part of the state, and it is a unique opportunity for the state to do something different, do something that will be a showpiece. And so just to give you a little bit more about what the plan is, they're calling it a 15-minute city. It will be mixed use. It will be intended to be very pedestrian friendly, to be what would you say, a tight-knit, something that people can live their whole lives without leaving, although probably they will. It's unique opportunity in the sense that the state, oftentimes in cases like this, what you get is that the state will sell the land and it'll be developed. And the state chose not to do that this time. What they're doing instead is they want to be the developer. And these people are all involved, and it's a key element of this is that they want to make R&D at the center of this. And the good people at the Gardner Institute at the University of Utah, who are always willing to produce numbers for just about anything, have basically crunched this. And they looked at two scenarios. One would be what you might call the baseline, where essentially sell the land off, let it develop the way it would probably develop otherwise. Or they looked at this model that you go intense into an R&D environment and let that drive the eventual product, whatever it is. It takes longer. It won't happen as fast. But basically, as these numbers say, you can make approximately 5 times the economic benefit that you would otherwise do in a normal development. And that's what we're here today about, frankly, basically, is this whole idea of science as a stimulator. There's a couple of models, and they're not perfect models because neither one of them looks like Draper. But basically, there's a corner of San Francisco that's right, south of what used to be Candlestick Park, and it's called Mission Bay. It's where the University of California at San Francisco moved their whole hospital complex. I think they might still be over the other place, but that became the anchor. The University of California at San Francisco is the big medical school for the California system. And it's spurred a lot of startups and that sort of a thing, and it is really a critical mass. Interestingly enough, the Warriors play in the Chase Center, which is right in the middle of here. And I know that there's been talk about whether we'll see a sports venue out at the point. That's above my pay grade. I don't know what's going to happen there, but I can tell you I think it's a possibility, and it would not prevent the rest of this from happening if it did happen. But for what that's worth. Okay, so then the other model is Kendall Square. And Kendall Square is not actually in Boston, it's in Cambridge, it's right across the river. But it sits right next to MIT. And it is also a similar sort of startup incubator. There's all kinds of companies that have started there. There's all kinds of presence there. That's the dream for this, and it's not going to play out the same way, obviously. And Draper, again, there is no University of Draper, so they're not going to start out the way that these other things did, but they're still basically a model to be able to do this. And so basically, since there isn't a college sitting next to it, the plan basically is to pull in all the colleges And that's where Jeff Moss comes in. I forgot to introduce our guests. I'm going to introduce them, I guess, as I do this then, sorry. Jeff Moss is a state legislator and who also works for the Utah system of higher education. And his job essentially, I mean, you may have many jobs, but the job that I know about is bringing the Utah system of higher education into this R&D model and making it work. And it's a little bit of a herding cats thing in the sense that he's got 16 schools, and at all levels. And that's kind of an important thing here in the sense that it isn't just about bringing in the top eggheads. It's also about lab techs and all level of education. And this will involve even the technical schools and everything else. And so that's what Jeff has to do. And I'm going to throw to Jeff now to elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. And I'm grateful to be with this panel. These are some good friends and some amazing people that are part of this project. Yeah, so I appreciate you bringing up a couple of the highlights of, one, the project itself. This project has been in the works for a couple years. Alan Matheson, who's the executive director that's leading this effort with the POMSLA, the Point of the Mountain Land Authority, has been out gathering information, getting feedback from all of these residents, 16,000, I think, different emails and people that have contributed to what do we want this to be. And so this is truly something that is coming from across the state, from a lot of different people's perspectives of what do you want this to be, and how do we make sure that this is something that the whole state benefits from, and that benefits not just our state for the next 5 to 10 years. This is a multi-generational project, and I think you've alluded to that. In terms of the tie into higher education, this was all intentional. When this was being put together, they actually made it part of the original plan with the legislature to say the innovation piece really will be driven by higher education. And interesting, you mentioned Kendall Square. That's a great example where higher education actually helped to drive that from the beginning. In fact, I spent some time going around to all the different innovation districts. And at Kendall Square, one of the things they mentioned from the very beginning is they attribute a lot of the success in Kendall Square to the workforce. And they put a lot of resources behind developing out the workforce, not just in terms of high-level professors, but the lab techs, all the other people that need to be part of this ecosystem. So we've been looking at all these different ways that we could build this out. And we believe that with getting the whole scope of technical colleges or research institutions, how do we really build something that can benefit the whole state, not just heart of the mountain, point of the mountain, but we want to be making sure that we're helping support rural, making sure we're supporting northern Utah, southern Utah. If there's one thing I learned from Kendall Square, they said, we wish that from the beginning we'd looked at this more holistically and not just as a Cambridge benefit, but how does this benefit the whole state? So we're making sure that we're incorporating all of these different universities and tech colleges into this effort.
Okay, so you need industry partners. And that's where Theresa Foxley comes in. Theresa Foxley is the CEO of the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, industry partners. This is where we pull in Theresa Foxley, and I appreciate Theresa coming today. Theresa is the CEO of the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. And my sort of back of the napkin sense of that is that it's her job to find industry for this project. And that is a challenge for a lot of reasons. But basically what she wants to do is build on Utah's advantages. And that's a variety of things. There are tax advantages, there are natural resources advantages, there are educational advantages. It's up to Theresa to try to figure out what are the best fits and to find those people and to get them here. And some of them, they may already be here, frankly. But, and whether that means, well, let me go back to my notes here. Looking again at these other models. In In Mission, Mission Valley, Mission Bay, sorry. Amazon, Biogen, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Twitter, and Novartis all have a presence. That's at Kendall Square. In Mission Bay, it's Uber, Dropbox, Lyft, and Genentech. I don't know that any of them are headquartered in those places, but they are basically the kind of companies that you want to attract. So, Theresa, please, tell me how you're going to do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Tim. And I also appreciate the opportunity to be here alongside James and Jefferson and see some friendly faces in the audience, too. So I guess also sort of rewinding, this opportunity has been thought through for now going on a decade plus, right? I think actually this was a topic of conversation when Governor Huntsman ran for office back in 2003. And so there has been a ton of effort by state partners over now going on 15 years. And I just want to sort of underscore some of the things that you already mentioned, Tim and Jefferson, and that is the key importance in every other innovation district that we've studied of having that industry academic partnership. Every other innovation district in the country that's been successful, and really in the world, has had such a strong tie to academia. And for us, as much of a challenge as it is to manage the 16 different the 16 different institutions that make up USHE, it's also such an incredible opportunity because it's neutral playing field, and we can expect each one of those institutions to bring their A game because they all want to be part of this super unique environment, and creating that sort of connectivity between, say, the food sciences at Utah State to life sciences at the University of Utah to culinary sciences with Utah Valley University could be something that is super magical. And so where we sit as an organization, as EDC Utah, is we've really tried to build off of some of the priority sectors that the state of Utah has identified as being important. One, because we have a competitive advantage in those, and you've mentioned some of them. It may be that we've created a policy advantage for ourselves, or it may be that there is some asset that exists here. And we try and build on those priority sectors because they have strong multiplier effects in the economy, tend to have higher paying jobs associated with them. They're durable, they're maybe less likely to be offshored. And those really do, though, tie back to these promising industries or industries that we think will be here in Utah and be onshore in our country for a long time. So what are we looking for as we think about corporate partners? First, do they have some need for research, right? What type of innovation are they doing within their company where they might be able to leverage an asset of a university or to create some sort of a partnership with researchers and students that are coming up through the university system. So that's going to be really important to us. I think you touched on a few of them in your references to Kendall Square and to Mission Bay, but that could be, again, life sciences, it could be energy related, it could be and I've mentioned a few of them, but we would hope that they would build off of and support some of the underlying sectors that the state has identified as important. So platform technologies, things like advanced composites that help aerospace, that help outdoor recreation and other industries that we think are important. Do we think this is going to be a sell to industry? There's a part of me that thinks that this is such a unique and attractive geographic location and such a unique concept that there is a part of me that thinks we're actually going to need to be really careful in how we balance the types of companies that end up operating at the point. Not wanting to get too dense in, with, say, one employer or one particular type of industry so that we mitigate some risk there, and ensuring that there's a space for companies that are in various different life cycles. Our universities have really, I think, done tremendous work in helping students, undergraduate and beyond, catalyze and form companies. We need a place for those companies to go and then graduate to. And we need companies that are a little bit further down the line, and we need to bring in venture capital partners that can help companies get through their research and development to commercialization. And then we need big employers. We need established firms who have pioneered research partnerships in other places and in other states, who can sort of help help bring that aspect of corporate partnershiping into our university system. So it's kind of a touch on, again, the types of industries that we might be looking for, the types of technologies that we might be looking for, and then the types of companies as well. And again, I would say our biggest aspiration, though, is that we bring in corporate partners that want to solve big problems. And by that I mean big problems in Utah, and we can talk about them. Some of them are environmental, air quality related, climate related, and we think if we can use this sort of development itself as a lab, then that can be then exported globally to help other communities that may be struggling with the same types of issues.
So what leverage do you have in terms of, is it incentives? Is it, what can you, when you're out there? And again, maybe you're not recruiting, maybe you're deciding. I mean, if they're beating down your door, but if how are you going to manage that? I guess
the top three things that companies are looking for today are talent. And so the main thing we got to get right in this development is making sure it's a place where people want to live, where people who don't live there want to be there, want to transit into it through public transportation and other modes. It's a place where people want, like, the place is probably the most important aspect of this, because our unique advantage will be the ability to access the brightest minds in the state, but also like people starting out, graduate students, the folks that are going to go and help maintain this beautiful development workforce. So really the key here is making this a place that is attractive to people before it is corporates.
And so does that, do we have an educated enough workforce for this? And I guess I'll ask both of you.
Yeah, so I think we're doing very well. We have one of the fastest growing states, one of the fastest growing economies in the country. We also, in Utah, have a competitive advantage. We have a lot of kids. That's actually something that I'm proud of, that Utah continues to grow and a lot of states are declining. We know that there are gaps. There are areas, especially as you're starting to look at emerging technologies. We have a group in Utah called Talent Ready Utah that the legislature created a little while ago that is very targeted around where are those gaps, how do we retrain people with new technologies that are coming in. We know that sometimes that displaces certain workers. How do we help get them the new training that they need? There are people that are not currently in the workforce, and we have new workforce coming up the ranks. So how do we get maybe looking at apprenticeships, getting students engaged maybe even at a younger age into projects and opportunities around workforce to help get them up into wanting to go into higher education and get those skills, or finding ways to repurpose some of the workers that are currently in industries that are declining. So we're looking at all of that, and Talent Ready is really the one that's really helping drive that effort for the state.
Okay, so, got my microphone. So it was mentioned that we want to solve the world's problems. So I guess we can start with Utah's problems, and there is no bigger one than the lake. But really basically just trying to identify what is, I'm not sure I would call it low-hanging fruit, but what are the big problems that this project and Utah in general what are the best opportunities here? And I'm going to throw that to James. This is James Campbell, and James Campbell is the Vice President for Innovation, and what's the rest of your title?
I'm the Director of Innovation and Sustainability.
Director of Innovation, okay, sorry.
But I'll take the Vice President.
Okay, yeah. Field promotion.
Congratulations.
So James, tell me, what problems are we going to solve here?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks to the esteemed panel here. But happy to be here. But no, I think the point does represent a unique opportunity, kind of building on what both Jeff and Theresa have been talking about, in how we can leverage this development to address some of the problems. You know, obviously, and I think Theresa mentioned that some with the air quality and climate. But it really all comes down to is, as I think of the Stoic philosophers, of how to live. And that's really this unique opportunity that we have here. We have an opportunity to design how are we going to live. Can we build the city of the future? That both in terms of how we live, how we work, and how we play. So we have a really unique opportunity to do that, as at the same time, and our role at the power company in terms of providing some of that infrastructure to support that city of the future. But we're at the same time as an industry and organization experiencing massive transformation to address those problems of air quality and climate change, as we're seeing an enormous the energy transition that's happening. How do we get off of fossil fuels and move towards clean or zero emitting resources? And to address that, you got to look at not just the generation of energy, but also the use of energy. And this is really where this development at the point, we have a real opportunity to design how energy is used there, in terms of how do we use mass transit, how do we use vehicles, how do we design the buildings, and then how do you use the energy within these buildings? Can we come up with smart grid technologies to move that power around? And so we see this opportunity, partnering with the universities and partnering with the businesses that are coming, is to, and I think Theresa talked about, is can we use this development as a living laboratory to solve those problems, but then also to come up with the technologies that can then be developed to spur our economy and that can be exported across the country. So we're excited about that, of being a partner and a participant in that, to really develop that next generation technology of really kind of that smart grid and that smart use of energy, and then how do we educate not just those that are using it today, but also for tomorrow. And I think this is another opportunity for that, is really to put into place that kind of foundation and that platform. So where I see kind of going back to your question, where do I see this development in terms of solving those problems is being that kind of shining beacon to show this is how we can live, this is how we can do it.
So how about air pollution? Is that something that this group could take on?
So the first thing that we can do when we design this is you look at buildings, right? So buildings are where people live and work. And so you can design the buildings to be emissions free. And that's not new technology. That you can do today. We can make these, and I'm assuming Alan and you guys are all looking at that, of how to make this kind of make it all electric, make it zero emitting. So that technology is there. But then what we want to make sure is, as we make these zero emitting and all electric, that you do it where it's efficient, so that we can bring in the technology, make sure we do have it efficient. And then also on the transportation side, how do we get to the locations and come apart, or go from location to location or building to building. We can put in unique transit and transportation opportunities. I know there's technology, again, coming from the Utah system of higher education. You know, Utah State University's developing wireless charging technology in roads that can really be transformative. So I think the technology that we can both take this kind of concept from the lab into implementation, we can deploy there. And so I think there's unique opportunities, both in terms of making these zero emitting buildings, making them smart buildings so they can communicate and connect with each other, and then also make sure the transportation systems as well. We're leveraging the technologies that are coming out of our universities to put those transportation systems in place that are zero emitting as well.
So how important is all that to what you need to do, Theresa, in terms of attracting I mean, you want to go out there and be able to sell this modern city, I guess, basically, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so important because we can create. So, maybe back up. Economic development is a game of comparisons, right? And we have corporate clients that are increasingly prioritizing those top three, right? Talent, but they also really are becoming more and more mindful of their impact on the environment. And so to be able to offer a place that has planned for and prepared to minimize its impact on the environment on the negative side of things, but then to bring in Utah's unique competitive advantage, which is we're a major metropolitan city in the heart of a gorgeous mountain range that allows outdoor recreation, and to pull nature into this development is going to be really attractive to the types of corporates that I think we all would want to have operating in our backyard. So we see the fact that this is planned, that sustainability has been baked into this development as really a competitive advantage, as a selling point for us, because so many of the companies that we are working with now are, I fill out a lot of spreadsheets, right, for companies, and they want to know how they can meet their corporate sustainability goals in Utah, and here's something that we can offer them. And not only, hey, maybe can you just come and operate here, but would you also like to be involved in as a research partner for the right types of companies to get involved in helping us advance this even further?
Okay, so I've got a few questions. I think that we also will have an opportunity for questions from the audience here. What needs to happen first? I'm directing these questions to all three of you. What needs to happen first? What's needed in the first phase?
I can jump in with that. So from the perspective of what we're trying to accomplish, the thing that I think is really unique about this development is it's actually becoming an impetus for something much bigger than just a development that partners with higher education. We actually want this to be a true convergence of policymakers, getting them out of the Capitol, getting them out of their county buildings as a place to go, getting industry folks to say, we want to come and solve problems, getting higher education, getting researchers to come in and really converge together to try to solve these big problems. Having a facility, a place to go, is actually a big deal. Like, we just don't really have that right now. Where would that be right now? So this is something that's really cool. So I'd say the very first thing we need to do, and something we're looking at in this first phase, one unique thing that we can do that other developments, Kendall Square, all these other places that we've mentioned, they were being driven purely from a real estate play, right? And so they were looking at the highest return on the front end. We have a unique opportunity here where we can be a little bit patient in what we put in there and actually put things in this first phase that maybe not the highest and best use in terms of an ROI from a real estate play, but could be massive in terms of the impact. So we're talking about putting something like a big convergence hall, a place where higher ed, where industry, where policymakers can come together and literally solve problems. That's the first thing that I think we need to do in this development is having a means to bring all these different groups together.
So are there competitors? Are there other states trying to do something like this? And if so, who are they and how are we going to beat them?
Well, I'll tackle this, and then I would love for Jefferson to jump in too, and of course James as well. We're peerless, but there's everyone else is trying to do it. And I'll break that into the two things. That we're peerless in the sense that the state of Utah owns the acreage here. And we have this blank slate, and again, this now almost 2 decades long visioning process with so much input from Utahns, and we have this sense of what the identity is that we want there, which is super unique. The thing that's not unique is that universities all across the country, all across the globe, are trying to reinvent who they are as they face, in many instances, declining enrollment, declining relevance. And so you do see there's probably 250 plus innovation districts throughout the country, some that are true innovation, some that are not. So what we really need to narrow in on as a community, again, is that focus, that identity, and then just being really hard-nosed about fidelity to the plan. And that'll be our differentiator, I think. But Jefferson I've recruited out of a lot of these other innovation districts, and Jefferson sat down with the leaders of them to figure out what's worked for them and what hasn't. But so, again, I'd answer that just in, we're peerless, but everyone else is also trying to do this, because the upside of having innovation sector jobs in your community is so enormous.
Well, and so I've had a chance to look at a number of these innovation districts. Several of us went and traveled around to see what are they doing well, and more importantly, where did they fail? And we learned a lot from some of the best of some amazing things they're doing, how they're partnering with industry, the corporate research, the corporate innovation, how they're solving problems. We also learned placemaking in some of these was not great. Mission Bay, interestingly, was one that we learned a lot from. They're very siloed. They've got a university part, they've got a corporate part, and they've got a living space, and they're really not intersected. And so that's why we're being very deliberate in this first phase of making sure that it's a place where people want to be. I mean, we're talking about recruiting talent. They want to go to a place that's fun, that's got a lot of activity. So they're looking at it through the lens of entertainment and shopping and eating, and all of that has to be, but also bringing in the higher ed right into the heart of that, bringing some of this corporate R&D right into the heart of that. That, to me, is very unique relative to a lot of the innovation districts that we've seen.
Yeah, and I think another key thing that's going to help is to not give up what actually has made Utah great as well. That has also made us really successful in the last 20 years. One of the things that has contributed to our good economic growth is our energy costs have been among the lowest in the country. And so I know we're kind of challenged with that. As we look at new innovative technologies and we integrate those in, we still have to be mindful that the underlying power costs need to be low so we can still have this competitive advantage. And so we have to, as we're innovating, we also have to have the discipline to keep those benefits as well.
Could not agree with you more. And maybe the other thing that I would just sort of like exclamation point on that is we've had low power costs, it's been reliable, it's been affordable, and it's increasingly sustainable. We also want to make sure that this place has a soul, right? Like you go to some new communities and you could be in anywhere in the world, right? And so having a soul or a place here, and you've touched on it, but I just think to me that is so important, is how do you make sure that when you are here, you are in a uniquely Utah place, and that shines through at every turn.
So to some extent, I think this question has already been answered, but what is the biggest challenge here? Is it finding corporate investment? Is it finding the smart people who want to work here? Is it choosing the right problems to address? What's the biggest challenge here to pull this off?
Yeah, I think it's all of those are elements. I think it's just the bringing together of all of these pieces, right? We have this amazing vision. We've already heard from what the public wants. We've heard a lot of the cool amenities and things that they're interested in. Now we've got to make that a reality. We talk about bringing all of our different universities and K-12 together and our colleges, making sure that they're aligned. That takes some work, right? We have to spend a lot of time kind of building those partnerships, thinking a little differently about corporate research. We don't do that a lot in Utah. Having corporates come to the universities and say, help us solve X, help us figure out how to do this. Having policymakers coming and saying, we're trying to solve this problem. We need more bright minds, whether they be entrepreneurs, whether they be researchers, to help us solve that. Those are all kind of new things. It's more programmatic than physical, but I think that's what we're trying to do that now. The good news is we have a little bit of time before these buildings will actually come up. So we've got a runway to start building all of that infrastructure, the programmatic infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think in Jefferson, I think you have one of the toughest jobs, because you have to bring together these institutions, organizations that traditionally have their own little fiefdoms and turf, and how do you break through those kind of turf battles? Because I think that's been a lot of the failure at the other innovation districts across the country, is that they do get, as you mentioned earlier, they get siloed. And so I think one of the benefits of Utah is the fact that the legislature's engaged, is you have a lot of the key participants kind of working together to find that solution. So that's I think is the biggest challenge, is making sure that the key folks are together and are on the same page, and that we don't kind of fall into this silos.
Can I add one more
The bigger the
comment?
mind, the bigger the egos.
Tim, I'll just add in, to have a governor who has a vision, to having a higher ed, the higher education community that has a vision, the legislature that has a vision, K-12, and the fact that they all have a very united vision together of what the potential of this could be, that is a very different world. Whenever we travel in other states, they're like, oh my gosh, trying to get the governor and the legislature to communicate, or higher education and K-12 to communicate. Utah's very unique in the fact that we actually get along. We actually work well together. We have this one Utah philosophy that I think will make us much more competitive than many of these other innovation districts that we've seen out there.
So how about getting back to the idea of what this means to the whole of Utah? I think there might be some sense that this is going to be the Emerald City, and they're not even sure they'll be able to get in, or whether there'll be reason for them to get in, or how is that going to play out? Or frankly, even if you invite the whole world into it, are the people you want there going to stay? I mean, how do you manage that? You want it to be a demonstration project, and you want to invite the rest of the state in, and is that going to work? How will that work? Anybody?
Well, I think the lessons that we learn and that we're able to demonstrate out here will be able to be applied in Salt Lake City or in Summit County or down in Washington County. I do think that we'll have a unique opportunity to really leverage and disperse and share what we've learned, and kind of what works and what doesn't work. And so I think that's where it will benefit the whole state.
Yeah, I'll add. So there actually are 5 innovation districts that are currently in some stage in Utah, what you could call innovation districts. Utah Tech is launching one. They've got 162 acres. Utah Valley University has 262 acres. Falcon Hill, that's happening. Salt Lake, downtown Salt Lake, Inland Port. We actually have a working group with all of us where we get together and talk about what are we doing. We're sharing best practices. We're talking about where are strengths that maybe we could help each other, so that we really are truly looking at this as a statewide effort. Having the point kind of be that nucleus to help pull that together, I think is a lot of value. But our goal, and again, if we only help the Wasatch Front, we failed miserably. We want to make sure that we're bringing the best to the point, but also pushing that out and sharing as much as we can and partnering with all of these other efforts across the state.
Tim, I'd also just point you back to the Gardner slide that you showed at the outset. If it works, all of Utah presumably benefits from reduced tax burden, so on and so forth. But so that'd be one thing to note, which is we're again this is in the middle of a very congested part of the state, so you're trying to develop it in a way that is reductive to that, right? So hopefully it creates better mobility throughout our state, as that's the thoroughfare of the state. And then I think too that I keep going back to this, our sense of what is the place of the point. And if it does become a draw for people to come and enjoy an art performance, or to be part of a festival, or to try a new restaurant, or to be or to benefit from life-saving new cancer technologies that are developed there, that would be the hope, is that it does have this beneficial effect, both as a destination, but also as a place that is creating that is solving problems, again, for our community, but the world, again, is our high aspiration, but we're going to hold to it.
So is this going to be like lab benches? What's going to be there besides the convergence hall? I guess it kind of depends on what industry wants, I guess, huh?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of discussion about this, and we're actually working, the developers that are involved with this project have extensive experience in doing similar innovation districts. So they've talked about certain targeted clusters. I think what Theresa's been really helping, and I should let you just answer this question, but what she's really been focusing on is what are we really good at? What do we already have a strength that maybe we're not fully capitalizing on right now? Secondly, what are the areas that we're doing well? I mean, I look at the heart of Silicon Slopes where we're sitting right now. There's so much opportunity there of bringing not just technology, we're doing great at tech, but how do we take AI or blockchain or VR, all these other technologies, and bring them in a place where they're bumping into life science and they're bumping into national security and cybersecurity, bringing those in a similar ecosystem. That's where the true innovation happens. So we're looking at not just where are our competitive advantages, but where do we see potential cross-pollination that leads to even newer cutting-edge technology.
Now I'm going to turn to the audience for questions.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely. Let me give you the microphone.
Great presentations and a terrific panel. I been thinking though that you have touched a lot on the breadth of preparation of people to be there, but you haven't quite hit it out of the park. And what do we do with the really sad, destructive, difficult social environment at the bottom of the scale? What do we do about a family that just got left out of doors because their rents went up in this latest acceleration of real estate? What do we do when these people have very poor health? Are we capable to go down as well as we go up? And I'd like to hear, I heard some really good things about that in your presentations, but I think we need to really identify that solidly as a very, very deep concern.
What are you going to do for the people at the bottom?
Well, I'll mention one of them is the workforce piece. I think right now we have a lot of opportunity, I would say somewhat low-hanging fruit, of ways that we can get people that are not currently in the workforce, getting them those stackable skills, getting that first certificate. We need these people. We need them in our workforce. We have, as we all know, we have a very low unemployment rate, and we have individuals that are not participating the way that they could be. So I think part of that is helping get broader exposure to what those potential opportunities are, and then helping provide those skills. To me, that's one of the best ways we can help a lot of these individuals. Getting them a technical skill, getting them a certificate. We know with a lot of this workforce, they'll come to us. I mean, I'll give you an example, biomanufacturing. They said there's some entry-level jobs that could pay very well without a lot of training. If we could get somebody a 6-month certificate and that could overnight double their salary, to me, that's a huge leg up for a lot of these individuals.
Ted, I just love being around you because you always expand my mind and my thinking on things. And well, but we should all care about. Again, this is a Utah project, right? And so it should benefit all Utahns. And so I think having sort of an ethicist involved in the project is something I've been thinking a lot about, and not ready for any sort of public announcement, so don't keep this to yourselves. Don't put it in the paper or anything like that. But
We're streaming.
but it like I have thought, and I do think technology can solve a lot of problems. I don't think it can solve everything. And I've also been having some conversations about, like we had one recently with a group who said, well, and you just said the word stoic. So I'm like rewinding to all of these conversations where I've had where can you blend technology and ethics and lessons learned from past eras to have some sort of universal fundamental guiding principle here as well that is mindful of the folks in this community who need us the most. And maybe it is workforce training. And maybe it is, again, a focus on technologies where we're needing to solve the biggest crises in these communities, and it may be environmental, but it may be putting a roof over people's head. And so at Jefferson and I were in a community, in a innovation meeting recently talking about volumetric building. And do you have something like that at the point, again, where we try to deploy research, skill development, training to again, go out and solve some of these Utah problems, but global problems too.
Yeah, and where I see is if we can advance some of the technology, especially this can be the catalyst, where we have like heat pump technologies and these others, where now we can bring these to the broader populace, so where clean air is not just, is independent of income, that can really be applicable, which is one of the challenges when we look at how do you start making investments in, and you're dealing with like tax credits. Well, if you're a renter, you don't get the tax credit, and you don't get to choose to make these investments. So I think, coming up with solutions and strategies to do that. We've been working with a developer, a partner that has been trying to bring emission-free housing as part of affordable housing, that try to break this perspective that it's only for higher income. And so I think making sure that we as these developments go, that we still keep that in mind. I mean, obviously, you're not going to solve it all at once. You're not going to be able to, and I don't think anybody would suggest put a bunch of homeless shelters in the in the innovation district as a way to solve it.
Somebody would suggest it.
But we still have to, and I think as Theresa was alluding to, it still has to be kind of part of what are we trying to accomplish at the end of this, that it is technology that can be dispersed across the whole society.
Any other questions?
So I have a question. My name is Travis Baker. I work for Mecca Property Management, and we do manage commercial and multifamily properties. So I was curious a lot to hear more significantly about the transportation availability within the community, but also how is that development going to be built up, I guess, to include multifamily or apartments? What are the demographics? It sounds like being innovation and focus on schooling, education, but then you'd mentioned a little bit about restaurants, so it feels like there's such a huge variety, but I'm just curious. I'm a resident of Daybreak, and I've witnessed over the past 20 years how much they've specified which builders are allowed to build where and what and how, and it's created quite a lot of soul residentially, but now with the Larry H. Miller Company, they're changing a lot of that to bring in much better commercial because there's just a lacking there. So what do you see maybe the soul of this community be regards to housing and transportation?
Yeah, well, I can speak somewhat to that. So we've talked about this, but they spent a lot of time, the Point of the Mountain Land Authority, gathering all that information. What does that look like? What should be the soul, the real cool factor of what this development is? And they've looked at all of that. They actually created a framework that they've put a lot of work into. They've recently hired, the Point of the Mountain Land Authority is just recently in the process of selecting a developer that's bringing a lot of those really good ideas. And again, they've spent a lot of time doing these developments all over the country. They went through an extremely rigorous process to even be selected as the developer. And they're coming up with a lot of those ideas. They're presenting it. In terms of some of the unique factors, there's currently an effort reaching out to the community again about some of those really cool, unique features, right? Is there's some element of this that would be truly unique to Utah and to this project. So they're looking at things like that. In terms of the transportation piece, a lot of that's still being worked through. The developer is still working through that process with the state. We do know that there's a strong desire to make this very accessible for everyone, and so we'd love to see rail being a big part of that, and providing a lot of different types of housing products, not just single family or not just apartments, to really be a broad mix. And that's really what the public has asked for. We want a lot of diversity in what is going to be housed there.
Yes.
Thanks, Tim. Question about bumpability. And Jefferson, you've used this term before. Just wanted to see if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, it kind of goes to what we were talking about before. It's having ways for people to interact. People from different backgrounds, people from different sectors, people from different disciplines in higher education, workers. It's like the old water cooler thing. We want a place where people can just have those interactions. And so much of that is dependent on this placemaking, having places where people are bumping into each other. And we saw that a lot when we went to some of these projects. Some of them were not very good. There was not a lot of social interaction. Others, it was just a hotbed of activity and a lot of excitement and people talking to each other. Getting into more of the innovation side, getting these different disciplines together, getting somebody who's working on a really cool AI project that's hanging out at a lunch spot that bumps into somebody who's working on a life science, really cool new technology. And all of a sudden they start having a conversation, and next thing you know, it leads to some new innovation. As weird as that sounds, that actually is where a lot of innovation happens. And so just creating the right ecosystem where people really are interacting, they're having that social, and I think that's been a really critical element of this development from the beginning.
It's kind of, we live in a world now where people don't have to bump into each other, and that's actually been a big issue. I promised Theresa a hard stop at 5, so I think we're probably there. I appreciate your time. I am going to give you one more slide because I always have to do this, and that is, please feel free to donate to the Salt Lake Tribune. We are now a nonprofit, and we would love to have some any help we can get. I work for the Innovation Lab, and our job is basically to try to deliver to the public information about things like this, basically. And so any support we can get for that, we certainly would appreciate it. And you can point your phone at that QR code, or you can just go to sltrib.com/donate. Thank you for your time. Thanks to our panelists. I appreciate it very much. I'm not sure what exactly we'll see out there in 20 years, but I suspect that it'll be rather remarkable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.